Well, here we are. This is really happening right now. You really are in your living room. I heard some of you may even still be in your pajamas. Some of you may be wearing less attire than that. I'm really in an empty room right now. This is really happening. I really did run out of toilet paper this week. There was a little scare in the house, and it really was impossible to find toilet paper on the shelf. Anyway, ramen noodles. I don't know if you caught that. There was a run on ramen noodles. They were nowhere to be found. The stock market really did crash. The world really has shut down. These are strange times that we're living in. I heard about what some people are doing during their quarantine, their social distancing, parents and children in the home together. My brother-in-law this week, I heard, I actually have a video of him. Check this out. Here he is. Yes, it is a large slip and slide in the shape of a square. He is driving around that slip and slide with a golf cart pulling a raft. He's actually an oceanic engineer, so he has gone to great lengths to perfect this slip and slide for his kids. I've seen some families on social media going for walks right now, just keeping their distance. They're 6 feet, but going on walks together. It's like this never happens, but it's happening now. I saw a very moving, a very stirring rendition by Sarah Groves, one of my favorite musicians, of the song, Great is Thy Faithfulness. There's people praying for loved ones, for family, who are infected with the virus right now. In fact, you may not know, there's a family that's part of our church family, the Wagner family, whose son Jason is in Indiana right now. He's still on a ventilator, is improving a little bit, and a lot of people have been praying for him. I want to invite you to pray with us for that family. Pray for the world right now. This really is happening. The world really has stopped. Maybe it takes something like that. Maybe it takes something like what's happening right now for us to take a step back and recognize what life is really about. To recognize that we're not as in control as we think we are. To recognize what the church really is. This moment is a teaching moment. The world is learning something right now, and I think, and I've discovered, that the church is learning something right now. This virus is teaching us something, or rather, God is teaching us something through what's happening in the world right now. It's like Joseph said of his brothers, what you intended for evil, God is using for good to accomplish the saving of many lives. I think in some ways, God is using this opportunity to shake us from our slumber. So here's just 3 things that I think this moment, this virus, this pandemic is teaching us right now. It's first of all, it's teaching us what life is really all about. Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6. This comes from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaching the crowds on the hillside of the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias. And there in that passage, we read some very famous words. This is chapter 6, verse 19. It starts like this. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth and rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve 2 masters, for he either will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I think that this pandemic is teaching people what life is really all about. It's causing us to stop and to take stock. There are families right now who have just been together under the same roof, and that's been very tense for some people. But I hope that you're experiencing what I know some people are experiencing, that tension is giving way to a stillness. That tension is giving way to an ability to focus on one another, to actually be in the same room together. Parents are having to learn how to interact with their children all day long. Children are having to learn how to honor their parents all day long, not just when they get home from school. I've talked to a lot of pastors this week. Actually, our cleaning crew last night came into the building, and they told us that they just left a church that was doing the same thing we were, recording a message to send out to people. This is happening everywhere. And I've talked to a lot of pastors. They are not feeling rest right now. They're feeling kind of stressed out by the need to adapt, by the need to continue to operate as the church when we can't meet together. And I've experienced that myself, that the technology that we're having to put together is just, it's failed. Things that should work, that in theory just should come right together, are not coming together the way that they should. And I can hear God just kind of whispering, hey, it's not about that. It's not about the production. And I think in a very real way, the same is true of church all the time, of life all the time, of the way we see the world all the time. That we tend to confuse what we think life is really all about. We are so far off the mark, but when we stop, when we're forced to take stock of where we're investing our energy, then maybe we can see a little bit more clearly. I heard a senator this week compare this moment to World War II. That at that moment when the whole world just kind of shut down, people started to focus their energy on different things. And I think maybe one of the reasons there's a parallel there is that certain manufacturing sectors in our society at that time shifted their attention. They stopped making what they made so they could make bullets and tanks and gear for the soldiers. But right now there's a different enemy. We're not fighting one another. We're fighting death. We're fighting disease. And it's kind of impressive that the way the world is starting to come together to solve this issue. The way that people are starting to realize that this is not about my own self-interest anymore. And so a distillery now is making hand sanitizer, and an auto-making factory is now making ventilators. And people are starting to think through, like, how do I stop focusing on me getting what I need and help contribute to the solving of this problem? And so I just kind of hear God shouting, don't miss this right now. You could totally miss this. And I think the words of Jesus are very instructive to us. Not to store up for ourselves treasures here on earth, to store up stuff for ourselves, but to lay up treasure in heaven by investing in people, investing in relationships, creating things that are eternal and things that last. I heard about a kid in Sanford 327, actually, on the Sanford 327 page. There was a mom who was bragging on her son, who set up a table out by the street and said, look, I've got free soup and canned goods and toilet paper, and it's yours. Just come by and share it. I was so, come by and get what you need. I was so moved and encouraged by my wife's coworker, who told her that she did stock up on the toilet paper. She was one of the culprits. She's why we were in such dire straits this week. And she started bringing that with her to work. And every day she found somebody else who needed toilet paper, and she would say, "Hold on, I'll be right back. I got some toilet paper in my truck." And we were the recipients of that just this past Thursday. And so my wife has followed suit. She has started, when she's in the grocery store, just if there's toilet paper there, she gets it and puts it in the cabinet. If you need it, we're going to share it. We will get through this together. I found myself coming to the realization that there is more than enough. We will get through this together. It could be the case that no one goes without. There are people here in our church who have enough resources to endure this situation for the next 5 years. And then there are some people in our church right now who have lost their job, lost their income. They're not sure where it's going to come from. And if we as a church, as a society, could just set aside our own selfish modes of operation, if we could stop storing up for ourselves treasures here on earth and let that go and share, we will get through this. There's not a question in my mind that we have what it takes to get through this. And as a church, I love the words of 2 Peter that God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. Everything we need for this moment. We've learned that through Calvary, through this ministry we have here at Safe Harbor, the way that we care for people, the way that we meet needs. We've learned that when we don't think we can meet the need, when we don't think we have enough, and we stop and we pray, God has come through over and over and over again. And people who might have otherwise held on to what they had so that they could have more of what they want, more of what they think they need, they're willing to share that. They're willing to let that go. And that need is met like that so quickly. We will get through this if we stop and learn what God is inviting us to learn right now about what life is really all about. I think this is also teaching us who really has control. This is a moment, this pandemic is teaching us who's really in control. And I hope you're coming to this realization really quickly that it's not us. We go through this life, we think we have everything figured out. And it's just a few things that we got to fix. And once we fix those things, then everything will just come together and our life will be what we're trying to make it. God is inviting us to move on this spectrum of generosity, of mine and more for me, towards towards the end of being like Jesus, who gave everything that he had. He's inviting us on this mission spectrum of our gospel wheel that we talk about, to move about building my own little kingdom, to moving towards living for his kingdom with anything and everything that we have. And in this process of maturity, I hope that you're coming to the realization that you are not in control as you think you are. None of us are. And this pandemic is teaching us that very clearly. Like, modern medicine has not figured this out. This is bringing the world to a halt. We are not in control. A couple weeks ago, though, we were reading in the book of Ephesians that there is a ruler of the power of the air. He's the prince of the power of the air. That Satan himself really does have influence in our hearts. He really does distract us so that we start focusing on things that do not last. We start seeking out to achieve our own agenda without God. But that is life. Life really is about living out this partnership with him, because we realize that while right now it may seem as though that Satan is in control, that sin is in control, the truth is that Jesus has overcome. And God is inviting us to partner with him to accomplish his purpose, because he is sovereign. And can we just stop and believe that for a minute? As a church, to pray, to invite God to accomplish his purpose in the world right now, and even to accomplish it through his people, through us. Could we recognize and believe that he has the power? And if we would just invite him and do this in partnership with him, then he will accomplish his purpose. I heard about a business owner this week who was sharing on their Facebook page that they don't know what's happening right now. They just started a business. It was going pretty well. They just got to a point where they might make an income, and then this happened. And in tears, through tears, he just was looking for some kind of encouragement. And maybe you're experiencing that right now. that things were finally coming together, and now this happened. But when we can learn to stop and realize that control has always been an illusion. That not that we don't have responsibility, not that we don't take action, not that we don't plan, but that we're not really in control. But God is inviting us to trust Him. This moment is proving that. So Jesus goes on after He says those words in verse 25. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither reap or sow or gather in barns, and yet your heavenly Father, He feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? And which of you, by being anxious, who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life?" What a picture. As though if we were to worry more, stress more, own the problem, then we can make things better. And the reality is we can't add an hour to our life, not even an hour at the end of our life. If anything, anxiety, worry, stress takes away life. And so Jesus concludes that thought in verse 34, and He says compassionately, He says, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow. For tomorrow will be anxious about itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." Don't worry about tomorrow. Do you have what you need right now? Is there a roof over your head? Is there food on the table? Right now, not tomorrow, right now. And this does not mean that we don't plan. This does not mean that we don't take action. This doesn't mean that we don't respond to life, but we can do so without worry. We can see things differently. We can operate with a kind of peace and patience that comes from the reality of knowing that God is sovereign, and Jesus, who loved us and died for us, is sitting at the right hand of the Father, and nothing can separate us from His love. Not death, not disease, not disaster. He's got us. He's with us through this. And even if we have to walk through the fire, even if we have to walk through difficulty, we don't have to worry. He is there with us. And we can operate with this kind of peace, this patience, if we would trust that. I used to read this passage and think, when Jesus says, "Hey, study the birds a little bit. Be an ornithologist." I've never really been a bird watcher. I don't have the patience for it. But I have observed that birds die all the time. This passage does not say you are a bird. The following passage, the following few verses does not say you're a flower. It says you are much more important than these. Jesus says you are so much more important than birds and flowers and bodies and buildings. And God cares for you. He is with you. Again, this is something we've learned in Calvary. I didn't learn this on my own. People who are involved in that ministry keep reminding me over and over again. I didn't understand it for so long. I did not understand what it meant to not worry about tomorrow. Yeah, but if people are coming to us with their needs and they haven't worried about tomorrow, then we're just enabling them. If people come to us with their needs and they're not stressed out about where their meal's going to come from, then we're just owning their problem. I didn't understand what it meant. See, this passage is not telling us not to take action. It's not telling us not to work. It's not telling us not to plan. It's telling us that we can do those things without worry. They may accomplish what we think they should accomplish, and they may not. But God will accomplish His purpose in our life. Jesus will accomplish His purpose in our life. His Spirit will sanctify us and lead us to truth, if we can operate by trusting Him, that come what may, He will use this situation for good. And so this moment, this pandemic, is teaching us what life is really about. It's teaching us who's really in control. And it's teaching us what church really is, what church is really about. And so Jesus, he's preaching the Sermon on the Mount, right? And he just skipping ahead about a chapter, he said some really memorable stuff. And then we get to chapter 7, verse 21. He says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. And on that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons and in your name do many mighty works?' And I will then declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" It's a really interesting passage. Not just that Jesus is so boldly saying that He will not allow people to enter the kingdom of heaven. But these people that He's talking about did big things, mighty things in His name. They cast out demons in His name. And Jesus says, "I don't know you." On what basis does Jesus say that He doesn't know them? They did these things for Him. They did these things in His name. And I think one of the things that I'm learning is that Jesus is inviting us by His Spirit in connection with God the Father, not just to do things for Him, not just to do things in His name, but to do things with Him. He is present every moment of every day. For those who believe in Him and trust in Him and have received His Spirit, He is present. And He is inviting us to live life in partnership with Him, to fill the earth with good things with Him. In Acts chapter 2, verse 42, we read about what happens in the church after the church gets started. It's the first day of the church, that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and the breaking of bread and to prayers. Verse 43. "And awe came upon every soul, and many signs and wonders were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common." Verse 45. "And they were selling their possessions and their belongings and distributing their possessions to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together, breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." That's the church. That's what it means to be the church. On this day when things were just getting started, on this day when everything changed, on this day when the apostles were overcome by the Holy Spirit and Peter preaches that sermon and people get baptized, they said, "Now what do we do now?" And I think we're in that very similar moment where we're asking ourselves, well, what do we do now? What is church really? If it's not a Sunday morning gathering, if it's not a production, if it's not greeters at the door and people in the seats and coffee and bagels and children's ministry, what is church really? And so just real quick, as I wrap up, there's 4 things we read about. Actually, I want to suggest that there's 5. And so those things, they are the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, prayer, and care. The apostles' teaching is the gospel. In the book of Ephesians, we read that the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Jesus Christ as the chief cornerstone. Jesus is the message of the apostles and prophets, and the apostles' teaching is the message about Jesus. It's the gospel. We say here at Safe Harbor that it is the good news about who Jesus is, about what He did, what He is doing, what He's going to do. And that message of the gospel is set in the context, the backdrop, the backstory of the entire arc of Scripture, which is God creates the world and invites us to be fruitful and multiply and to have dominion over the earth. In other words, we're being invited in the beginning to do life in partnership with God and create good things in partnership with Him. And then, of course, you know what happens, that the man and the woman, they take the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they eat it. And in the day that they eat of it, God says, you will surely die, and spiritually there is death. And what that episode is really about, the fall is really about, is about humanity wanting to have dominion and fill the earth with good things outside of a partnership with God, to do it on their own. And so there's creation, fall, and in the middle of this big picture story, Jesus enters right in the middle, full of grace and truth, the Word made flesh, to do the thing that we could not do. And by His death on the cross and His resurrection, He bought back humanity. And he invites us to believe that truth and be redeemed from this empty way of life, to come back into this relationship with God and now begin to fill the earth with good things, to multiply, to be fruitful, and to have dominion over the earth in this new way, not just in relationship with God, but God in you by His Spirit. And at the end of this story arc is restoration. So we're right in the middle there, between redemption and restoration. And God is restoring the earth right now in partnership with us. We can't wait for Him to finish the job. And that's the gospel. That's the apostles' teaching. And to fellowship, intentional fellowship. Man, we are having to work really hard to fellowship right now. And of course, we're excited about this thing being over and us coming back together in this room and fellowshipping together, but we can fellowship right now. Thanks to technology, we can have fellowship intentionally, and we are inviting you to do that. Right now, just post, comment, pray for each other, post pictures right now of what it looks like in your living room watching this live feed. We are going to have to work a little harder, be a little bit more intentional to have fellowship, but if we don't have it, the church isn't happening. And the breaking of bread, which may be about communion, and I'll just remind you that in the early church, and you see this really clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, in the early church, communion, the Lord's Supper, happened in the middle of a meal. That the breaking of bread was a meal, and at the center, the focus of that meal was the Lord's Supper, was communion. And the Apostle Paul, when he writes this letter, is very critical of the church, because when they come together for this meal, they're very selfish about it. There's people who are wealthy who come and they eat wealthy food, and then there are people who are poor and they go without. There are people who show up early and they eat all the food before anybody else gets there. And the Apostle Paul says, when you come together that way, it's not the Lord's Supper that you're eating. And the reason it's not the Lord's Supper is because the message about Jesus, this gospel, the good news about who He is and what He did, the Lord's Supper is all about sacrifice and humility, that He gave up everything for us. And if you're not doing that for one another, you're not celebrating the Lord's Supper, you don't know Jesus. And I think the bigger question is not just, do we know who Jesus is, but do we allow ourselves to be known by Him? To be loved by Him, and to love one another, to love the world as a reflection of the way that He has loved us. So the breaking of bread and prayer. Just a couple chapters later, we read about the prayers of the early church. They were earth-shaking prayers, and the reason they were earth-shaking prayers is that they were unified prayers. We want to invite you to be part of our prayer team right now. Prashant Chapti, one of our elders, is administrating that, and all you have to do is just send us an email to prayer@safeharbor-church.org. Send us an email there, and we'll get you on our prayer team. There'll be a private Facebook group, and we want to pray together. I want to invite you to pray together right now for the world, to join us in prayer, and to pray for the people who are in need, and to pray for the people we love and we know who are sick. You join us in prayer. And then lastly, there's actually a fifth thing we read about, that it was the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, the breaking of bread, to prayer, and care, that they shared what they had in common. Whenever somebody had a need, that need was met. They cared for one another. And that gracious care And the word actually is, we later read that they enjoyed the favor of God and people. That's the word grace, that they enjoyed the grace of God with people, that there was gracious care, not just for one another, but it overflowed in the way that they cared for the people around them. So we're inviting you to think about potentially joining our team of caring for our senior saints right now. Who are not supposed to go to the grocery store, supposedly a little bit more vulnerable than the rest of us. And we want to express our love and our care for them. And you can join that team. Right now, just post right here. Just post and let us know you want to be a part of it, or email us, eldercare@safeharbor-church.org. And then lastly, you can give to Calvary right now. We want to invite you to consider giving a little extra over and above what you normally give consistently and sacrificially. You don't have to be here to do that. You can do that online, safeharbor-church.org/give. Donate a little bit extra to our Calvary team. That will be used to care for people, to meet people's needs. We already know that it's needed, so we're asking you to give. And maybe this means that you and your family reach out to your neighbors. And so you can't go knock on their door. Maybe you can put a table out at the end of your road and say, here we have some stuff, we want to share it. And I really believe that now, as we start to understand what church it really is about, not only will we get through this, but we will grow through this, we will see more clearly, and we will be the church. Let's be the church. Our Father in heaven, you are gracious and good and compassionate and faithful, and you see what we're experiencing right now. We invite you by your mighty hand to bring healing to those who need it, to push back this wave of disease. We invite you, we ask you to turn the tide. We ask you that you would help us to see more clearly right now what life really is, what church really is, who's really in control, and to not let go of that, but that this moment would change us for the better eternally as we learn what you're teaching us right now, as we start to see more clearly, as we live out what it means to be the church. In Jesus' name.